Monster Hunter, a world full of amazing monsters ranging from terrifyingly massive dragons to agile and quick lemurs. Everyone always talks about how amazing the monsters are and how diverse they are, including myself. But rarely do people ever talk about something that seems to be disappearing from the Monster Hunter series, being subspecies. So, what is a subspecies? A subspecies is an alternate version of a monster that either differs from the original in its coloration, moveset, and locations where it can be found. Some subspecies change drastically, while others barely change at all. Now, some people believe that subspecies are just reskins of other monsters, and I would strongly disagree. I believe that subspecies are some of the most interesting and creative monsters in the Monster Hunter series. In order for me to better explain my reasoning behind this, I'll be talking about 3 different aspects of subspecies that make them better and more unique than their original counterparts. I'll be talking about these subspecies biology, gameplay changes, and overall creativity. So, with that being said, we can talk about the Art of Subspecies in Monster Hunter. Before I start talking about the biological uniqueness with subspecies, I should define what a real-world subspecies is. For those who don't know what a subspecies is, the official definition is a taxonomic category that ranks below species, usually a fairly permanent geographically isolated race. In layman's terms, it's a specific species that lives in a different region. For example, a spider monkey is a specific species of monkey, but a subspecies of a spider monkey would be an ornate spider monkey or a Mexican spider monkey. While these monkeys are both spider monkeys, they live in different parts of the world and look and act differently from each other. The geographical areas that these spider monkeys live in affects their evolution because of the different climates, species, and environments in that geographical area. Now, if you know anything about how subspecies work in Monster Hunter, then you would know that they can either be drastically different from the original subspecies or practically identical to the original one. Now, if you're looking at this purely based off of monster count and diversity, you could say that the subspecies like Purple Gypceros is a lazy duplicate of the regular Gypceros and is just there to fill more monster slots. But, if you look at this from a biological perspective, then this is really fascinating. Just like in the real world, not all subspecies are drastically different from each other, much like these 2 African elephants. The savanna elephant on the left and the forest elephant on the right. Although these elephants might look a lot alike, there are some minor differences that make them unique from the standard African elephant. And these unique differences are a direct consequence of the way that these 2 subspecies of elephants evolved in their environments. So if you look at Purple Gypceros in a biological sense, then this subtle change is pretty cool because it makes these monsters seem more realistic, and more importantly, it helps with world building. If you have a world where you can see how certain monsters are actually affected by different ecosystems, this not only makes the monsters seem more realistic, but it also makes the ecosystems themselves more organic. For example, you can see how the frozen seaway makes a normally tropical Najaharla that uses its scales and sound vibrations for self-defense become an Arctic creature that uses its scales to bounce water around the area to damage you. This could also lead people who play the game to wonder what happens if a Najaharla lived in the desert or in a volcano region. Speculation like this is great for a game because it keeps people drawn into the series, which is exactly what the developers want. Even though the subspecies biology is fascinating, this can easily be overlooked and not appreciated. However, something that can be more easily appreciated is the changes in subspecies gameplay. One of the biggest changes for a subspecies is its coloration. Even if the gameplay doesn't have a significant amount of changes, a subspecies will almost always stand out from the original species with its appearance. Even the Purple Gypceros' coloration has noticeable changes when compared to the original. While this is an important feature and what helps makes the subspecies stand out, this isn't what makes subspecies special. That would be the gameplay, of course. In order for me to properly explain this, I'll be taking a look at the Ignactor and its subspecies, the Glacial Ignactor. Now, you might be wondering why I'm talking about Ignactor since its subspecies attacks are practically identical to its own attacks. Well, while Ignactor and Glacial Ignactor don't differ too much in their literal attacks, they do differ in something very important: their mechanics. What do I mean by this? Mechanics are what make each monster stand out. When you think of Brachydios, what is the first thing you think of? you think of its slime mechanic, or if you think of Ceregios, you usually associate it with piercing scales. These mechanics are what make each monster's fights different and creative. So now that you understand the significance of a monster's mechanics, I can explain the significance of Glacial Ignactor having a different mechanic from Ignactor. If you don't know what Ignactor's mechanic is, then let me explain what it is. Ignactor is able to go underground and cover itself with lava. When this lava hardens, your weapons will bounce off of it and you'll do less damage. You can only attack it normally before the lava hardens, or you can break a certain part of its armor. So when you're fighting Ignactor, you want to get in as many attacks as you can when it goes underground, and before its armor hardens. Glacial Ignactor, on the other hand, is the exact opposite. You can only hit Glacial Ignactor when it isn't covered in an icy armor. When there's no ice, that's when you're able to hit it. So now instead of having to wait for it to go underground, you want to make sure that it doesn't go underground. Even though these fights are nearly identical, this one minor change completely changes the way that you have to approach Glacial Ignactor. As you can see, even though these two monsters are practically identical, you have to use two completely different methods to fight them. Now, not all subspecies have this notable of a change with their fights, but a majority of them have something new with their fights, whether it's a new mechanic, an old mechanic turned on its head, a new element, or even just one new attack. These changes are what make the subspecies gameplay stand out. Now, these changes can either make a subspecies more enjoyable than the original species, or it can make a subspecies more annoying than the original. And that's what's so cool about subspecies. It diversifies a certain species' gameplay, and a good amount of the time, I find myself enjoying monster subspecies more than I do the original. Now, changing subspecies gameplay is probably the most important part of a subspecies, but my personal favorite thing about subspecies is something that I'll refer to as reimagining. I know this is a weird point to bring up, but it's a really important one to discuss because it's one of the biggest reasons why subspecies exist in the first place. If you don't know what I mean when I refer to reimagine, think of this as a monster's second chance. There are some monsters that were either too simplistic, not enjoyable, or it just didn't have the right moveset. So, if the developers feel that way about a certain monster, or they realize that a certain monster is hated by people, then they can have the chance to redeem themselves by creating a subspecies of that monster that might have some minor changes and make that monster more enjoyable, or it can have almost a complete redesign. This lets the developers have the opportunity to redesign a monster and fix something about it that they don't like, or they could do it just to see what happens if Zinogre really had the ability to use Dragon Blight instead of Thunder Blight. Now, this could also be said about rare species and deviants, but that's a topic for a different video. The only reason why I'm even talking about rare species and deviants in this video is because I know if I don't bring it up, then someone else will in the comments. What I will say about this is that subspecies are in Monster Hunter purely because of environmental changes, while deviants and rare species are influenced by hunters and other story-related events. Which is cool and makes them stand out, but deviants are just amped up versions of the normal species, and rare species aren't super common and are usually fought in arena-like areas and are treated like elder dragons. Subspecies, on the other hand, can be very different from the original species, and can be found in plenty of diverse areas. So, while all these type of species can be considered reimagined versions of monsters, subspecies in particular can make a monster almost feel like a completely different one, while rare species and deviants feel like more amped up versions of the original species. In conclusion, subspecies are some of Monster Hunter's most creative monsters because they have a lot of real-world biology associated with them, their gameplay has more flexibility than any other type of species, and they're a way for developers to recreate a monster, whether it's from scratch or by fixing some minor details about it. Subspecies are by far the most interesting species to me personally, and that is why I'm so upset that Monster Hunter seems to be moving away from subspecies. I believe that subspecies are an essential piece of Monster Hunter, and without them, the game wouldn't feel the same. Wait, is that a new subspecies?